bid you welcome if you were here. So I'll just take over that role for a moment. I'm looking forward to this discussion this afternoon, and I want to share with you. Is it not working? I hear it is working. Yeah, it is working. Yeah. Do you want me to speak a bit louder? I'll try if my voice can, or closer to the microphones. But I shan't overdo it. If we were in a different room in a different time, I probably might say winter is coming, but not in this temperature. I want to share some thoughts with you this afternoon about why the European Commission decided to draft a Green Deal and present it yesterday. I think we have to look the facts into the face, or to quote another famous film, to look beastie in the eye. I think science is clear, the facts are overwhelming. We need to do everything we can do to keep temperatures lower, to make sure that the rise of temperature doesn't go beyond 1.5 degrees. It's going to be hard enough to get there. When I tried to explain that to my kids when they were asking, why are you so insistent on that? And it's easy to explain it to kids when you talk about what's happening to our biodiversity. That's very easy. They understand that and they want us to take action. But I also try to explain it in a wider sense because of the fundamental changes ongoing in our society, not just because of biodiversity, not just because of climate change, also because of the industrial revolution we're in and how that shakes up all the relationships across the globe between peoples and nations. And my point is this: just imagine that we would have some astronomers looking into the sky and seeing a comet, and the trajectory of the comet is our planet, and the comet will reach our planet in 30 years' time unless we do something. Would we then be having a discussion about, yeah, but are we sure about this? Oh, do you think we can afford this? And I say to my kids, what we see in science is comparable to that comet. And we need to mobilize all the creativity we can muster in global society to make sure that we have an answer so that comet doesn't hit Earth, and so that we rebalance our relationship with Mother Earth in a way that everybody can have a decent life based on our values on this planet. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the basis for the Green Deal. This is not just an answer to climate change. It is an answer to the manifold changes that we are facing. It is also a growth strategy. If we implement the policies that we advocate in the Green Deal, it means rebooting our economy, setting it on a completely different footing, looking completely differently at how we produce food and consume food, looking completely differently how we organize mobility, how we negotiate our relationship with other parts of the world, how we create a better balance between our cities and our rural areas, etc., etc. So we can only... Is it still not working?
No, it's because outside they cannot hear you.
They can't hear me outside. Wouldn't want that to happen. So what I'm trying to say is this: it is much more than us trying to attain the Paris objectives. It is about understanding that we need to be masters of our own fate, and we can only do that if we mobilize governance at all levels: local, regional, national, European, global, and of all nature, no longer just governance by governments, but governance by civil society, by everyone who's interested in this, by economic actors, by trade unions, by NGOs, by the scientific community, by academia at large, by the media, etc. That we all understand we have a stake in this. That we do this in a way that is intergenerational, because I fear a lack of understanding between generations if we're not very careful. And all of that you can read in essence in the Green Deal. And I will be happy to go into all the different elements of the Green Deal, but it is a comprehensive approach to the issue. It's not a blueprint. It's not a blueprint. It's a roadmap. It offers avenues for us, starting with the assumption that we want to be, or hopefully the commitment in law at some point soon, that we will be, Europe, a climate neutral continent by 2050. And then starting from that conclusion, take steps back until today and see what needs to be done in intermediary steps to get there. And obviously one of the first things we will need to do is make a sound assessment of where we need to be in 2030. And, you know, we have a lot of scientific indications, but I want to do a very thorough impact assessment between now and somewhere in the summer next year so that we know exactly what needs to be done to get us where we need to be. What I find most exciting and also stimulating is that society has caught on to the urgency of the matter. Over 90% of Europeans see climate change as an urgent matter that needs to be dealt with. And this is the best starting point you can have as a politician if there's so much support for taking measures in such an area. I also see, but we will hear a bit more about this later on, I also see a sea change in the attitude of the private sector. Only in a very few years, well, he was on it for a longer time, but most of them only a very few years, with a few exceptions, especially in the fossil fuel industry, but mostly, especially big corporations, are on the same line already, understanding that this paradigm shift is something they have to embrace rather than try and slow down. The challenge in the private sector, ladies and gentlemen, I think will be with small and medium-sized enterprises, because for them, they don't do planning over 20, 30 or 40 years. They think about tomorrow and next year and how they keep their employees employed. And we need to make sure that we have a proposition for them. For instance, making it easier for them to refurbish housing, to make sure houses are isolated and are made climate neutral or are fitted with sustainable energy sources. That could be a huge engine for jobs, and it can be done. The capital is there. It's a matter of governance, of organizing it, of mobilizing banks, of mobilizing intermediary agencies such as chambers of commerce, of creating nexuses with bigger industries so that they understand they need to take the small and medium-sized enterprises along on this road. And I think if we can show some early successes, if you can show this works, we can take away a lot of the fear that people have for this change. Because we live in a day and age, and let me end on that, we live in a day and age where for the first time in a long time, the dominant feeling is not, my kids will be better off than I was, so let's put our shoulders under that. The dominant feeling is, I fear for the future of my kids. They will probably be worse off than I am. So what is it, if that is the dominant feeling? What will you do? What will your attitude be? If then a politician comes along and tells you, we need to change, you will say, change equals loss, and I don't want that, so no change. And if we don't break that mold, we will be in the ironic or really sad situation that those people who will suffer most if we don't address the challenge of climate change, the most vulnerable people in our society, can be mobilized to be also the most vocal people to stop us responding to the challenge of climate change because they believe there's nothing in it for them other than loss. So if we want this to happen, we have to make sure it is done in a socially viable way so that people see, not just hear, but see that we leave no one behind. And then I believe we can mobilize societies to such an extent that it will embrace the opportunities that this new way of looking at our society has to offer. That ladies and gentlemen, is hopefully the essence of the Green Deal when you look at it more carefully. And again, it will only happen, you know, Europe is responsible for approximately 9% of emissions, so it only will be effective on a global scale if we can convince our other partners to take comparable measures or to go along the same path. And we will do everything we can. All our efforts will be directed at that, and that's why we're here, and that's why we're working hard at this COP. But by the COP next year in Glasgow, we have to be ready. We have to have our plans worked out. We have to be able to make a proposition to the other parts of the world that has a realistic perspective of keeping us on track to fulfill the Paris goals. Thank you very much for your attention.